So what really got me going on sleep is a big topic. Is I attended a talk at an NSCA conference one year, and the topic was recovery. And you go in thinking we're going to talk about cold tubs and we're going to talk about foam rolling. You know, that's what strength and conditioning people love to talk about, all those things. And right away, he said, none of that is recovery. All of it is a supplement to recovery. The only way you can recover and regenerate is sleep and eat. And it was kind of like a mind blown moment, like, oh yeah, like those are supplements, sort of like a nutritional supplement to fill in the gaps or to help assist your regeneration. So sleep then became kind of a big topic after that. I think it was a Stanford study. I used to have a copy of it.
The basketball one?
Basketball players, yeah. And after the researchers encouraged 10 hours of sleep, every single measure they did improved, from shooting percentages to just general well-being questionnaires. It was an interesting, really interesting study. So
2011?
I'm sorry?
Was it 2011?
Yeah, I think that's right.
I'm just pulling up some stats for it. That's all. Keep going.
Yeah. So this is what I'm going to talk about today is based on a podcast I listened to. It's from the Adam Carolla show, May 17th, 2019. And the guest was Dr. Michael Bruce, who calls himself the sleep doctor. He's a PhD, not a medical doctor. His website is thesleepdoctor.com.
Heard of him.
So I listened to this podcast, and I also listened to his TED Talk, so we can get a link to that as well. So what got me thinking about this during this time where people are home, and it's like, well, aren't we all getting enough sleep because we don't necessarily have that tight schedule, you know, as far as getting up for work. And I'm sure some people listening to this, you know, are having to get up for work, you know, whether they're healthcare professionals or whatever. But this is a great time to really figure out how much sleep you need and then use that information, carrying it forward to when you do schedule, how we're gonna do that. So the goal is to wake up without an alarm, because that's when you will feel the most alert and regenerated. So his, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit to go towards the goal of this conversation, but you want to break it into 90-minute intervals. Therefore, to say you need 8 hours of sleep, that's not, it's never going to be you need 8 hours of sleep, because that's not a multiple of 90 minutes. Most people are going to need a multiple of 90 minutes. So what I found is I need, by just letting myself sleep until I wake up on a regular basis, I found I need somewhere in the 8 to 9 hours of sleep. So if I leave myself a 9-hour window, I will get enough sleep, because I've left enough time to get 90-minute intervals if it does extend out to 9 hours. So what if you do need to get up early? How are we going to figure that out? Just go to bed 15 to 30 minutes earlier every night until you start waking up before your alarm. You'll start figuring out how long that sleep window needs to be. And then you can figure out a bedtime based on that information. So you guys with me so far?
Oh, yeah.
You haven't put me to sleep yet.
Right, thanks. That's funny. So it's very individualized. Mm-hmm. And he talked about two things on that. One, it's very individualized. And two, caffeine cannot replace sleep. So if you're not getting enough sleep, caffeine is not a replacement, because you're not regenerating without
and everything. Yeah.
And some people don't need, like, I unfortunately need that large window of sleep I could be much more productive if I didn't need that sleep. But some people don't need that. He said he goes to bed at midnight and wakes up at 6:17. Like he was that exact when he talked about it, which that would be great. But so
I get so much work
visualize, you got to figure it out for yourself. What was that, Dennis?
I said I'd get so much work done, like so much
Right.
more work done if I had like an additional 4 hours after my kid goes to bed to just like pound away at work. You know what I mean?
Right. So that was a huge takeaway for me. Figure out how much sleep you need. Figure out a bedtime based on 90-minute intervals, because your sleep tends to cycle in 90-minute intervals. And then another thing that he talked about a lot was chronotypes. And we talked about this when we were talking last week. We talked about this a little bit. And it's not as simple as a night owl or an early riser. He actually breaks it into 4 different categories. And then quiz online. That URL is thepowerofwinquiz.com. Thepowerofwinquiz.com.
Win as in like WIN.
WHEN.
Oh,
When.
when.
Yeah, when. And this is based on utilizing your body's natural rhythms, your hormonal variations throughout the day, your normal diurnal variation. And so it does vary between different people. And he lays out 4 different things. One is a bear. I'm a bear. Like 55% of the population is a bear. And I'm not going to go through all the details, but the quick takeaway on the fact that I'm a bear is I tend to get up when the sun comes up, tend to get sleepy when the sun goes down. I'm not necessarily a natural, like, get up early type person, but if the sun's up, I am going to wake up. And another big takeaway is the work day is kind of based on the bear. Like,
Yeah.
8 to 5 work day. So people who are not a bear have to sort of conform to that. So if you take the quiz, he'll tell you when the best time to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, when the best time to drink your coffee, when the best time to exercise, based on your chronotype.
So let me interject here really quickly.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier that like he said like caffeine can't replace sleep, but he doesn't completely like get rid of it. Like in terms of like you can still use it to kind of give you a boost, but it can't take place of the overall
Exactly.
sleep that you're missing.
Just because you're not tired anymore doesn't mean you're doing good things for your body.
Right.
Right. So you're not doing the same beneficial things for your body as sleep does for athletic development and recovery.
Right.
Which is awesome.
Right. So the sleep is crucial. Caffeine can help. So when he talked about caffeine, let's just go off on that tangent, because if you want to know more about that, you can take the quiz. You can watch the TED Talk that he'll email you your results in the TED Talk, and you can get all those details.
Is it a free quiz?
It's totally free.
It's a
You just have to enter your
email. Yeah.
So
what was that guy's name again?
Michael Bruce, Breus.
Yeah. So you said it was like a weird name or a weird like spelling.
Weird spelling of Bruce.
Yeah.
So he talked about caffeine. Let me look at my notes here. So the best way to wake up, regardless of your chronotype, is to immediately get as much light as possible. And the light is what stimulates your cortisol and adrenaline. So this is all based on hormones, like going to bed, your melatonin, your natural melatonin. Waking up, you want the cortisol and adrenaline. Well, those start to wear off. So he said, if you can hold off your caffeine intake for 90 minutes from what you can stimulate your natural cortisol with light. And then once your cortisol starts to drop off, you can reinvigorate it with caffeine intake.
Yeah.
and
I've
kind
heard
of
about that.
on that.
Even playing, no crashing,
Yeah.
stuff like that is what. Yeah.
Right. And in the chronotypes, there's except for the wolf, which is the basically the night owl, there's two different windows. There's a morning window and an afternoon window that caffeine can benefit you. For the wolf, there was an afternoon window, and then he's like, we're already awake. He said he's a wolf. We're already awake at night. We don't need more caffeine. We need to get away from that and start to, be able to eventually wind down and actually go to sleep at some point. So that's what he talked about with caffeine. He wasn't anti-caffeine by any means, but obviously you got to use it
Appropriately.
so it doesn't interrupt your natural sleep cycle.
You know what I find weird? You know what I find interesting, Jesse, about you specifically, because I remember we talked about this last week, is like you were saying, like you feel like your best time to kind of work out is around that like 10:30, 11 o'clock like time frame, right? If you do the math and you go back like 90 minutes, right? And then, so like by then you've kind of gotten your morning, like cortisol levels up through the light and everything like that. Then you've interjected some additional energy boost with that caffeine that you could
Right.
have. And it kind of, if you do the math right, it kind of times up to being like that area is why kind of your nervous system is kind of ready and primed to.
Right. And some different things kind of came together for me for that. One is just my work schedule allows me to work out then. But also not caffeine, coffee upsets my stomach. So I started looking for alternatives to coffee because I still wanted the caffeine.
Yeah.
So through a lot of experimentation, I tend to get up and drink just black tea with either honey in it or like some lemon. And that's not a ton of caffeine in it. And then I was like, well, this isn't enough caffeine. And so I started doing energy drinks, which isn't a great alternative because there tends to be a bunch of other crap stuffed in there. So I was like, what else am I going to do? And I found on Amazon, I think it's called Zest tea. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a tea that has as much caffeine as coffee. So what I do is I drink my black tea when I get up, try to get that light. I get my day going. I get to work. I sit down to do my work, and then I drink my Zest tea while I'm doing administrative work. By the time I'm done checking my dashboard, my payments, all that boring stuff, the caffeine starts to kick in, and then we're hitting that 10:30 time frame.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does. It fits with what he talks about. It actually does. So, or if
because my workout time, my body feels best at like 3, but I have to work out at like 9:30. So I want to take that test and kind of see how that relates, because I'm up at, I was looking at my Fitbit tracker and I'm up at, no matter what, like 7:15, no matter what, and I get 6 hours of sleep average. So I'd be intrigued to take that test and kind of see how that relates to how my body naturally feels.
right.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're more of a wolf based on just the little information you just gave me, but yeah, take the quiz. It's not long. You get the information pretty quick, and then if you watch the TED Talk, which is only 15 minutes long.
I got the link here too in our discussion, so I can pop it over after.
Cool.
I've been typing some of this stuff in the document, the Google Doc over here that we've been talking about, and putting some links. So
Cool.
We'll figure out how that's going to work for you guys on without Google. But
do they does the test or the quiz that you take, like, does it take into account like your lifestyle, like in terms of like what you do for a living, that type of stuff? It doesn't go that deep?
No, it takes into account like what your natural rhythm is, regardless of all that
anything
external.
Yeah.
And then you try to figure out how to work that into what your schedule needs to be.
Gotcha.
You see, so
Yeah.
So like I said, I just happen to be a bear. He does talk about how it changes through your life.
I was just going to ask that because there's been times where I crush it 10, 11 p.m. going to bed, up at 4 and just killing it all day from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. doing it again. You know, like I can get into those rhythms and feel great and awesome all the time, but I do have to take really good care of my time before bed and my time when I get up. If I don't like do some mobility or some stretching before I go to bed and like really bring myself down to that 10 p.m. time, because I like to stay up late too. Like I'll stay up late and then I'll wake up whenever and early, whatever. But yeah, I've been playing around with that. I have to take care of those half-hour windows whenever I get up and whenever I go to bed if I'm going to be on it. I don't know, does he talk anything about that? Like morning and evening routines? Does he talk about the light stimulation of your phone, like 30 minutes before bed and stuff? I've read a little bit about this before.
I think that's definitely a good point, just because I haven't played with it at all, but I just noticed that if I've been trying to get more into like leisurely reading, like not science or strength and conditioning or science or leadership based, but like I'm reading It right now by Stephen King, and I'm starting to like try to get into that. And I noticed that when I do read before bed, I get a really nice, good full sleep. Other than the nightmares that it leaves me with to go to sleep.
I was going to say, after reading that, bro, I'm out.
but no, in all seriousness, like I feel better, and I wonder if like I have put myself in more of like a parasympathetic state, right? If I brought myself down to where my body all it wants to do is just relax. You know what I mean?
Right.
You guys ever watch any Kelly Starrett or like have seen him progress through like mobility WOD and now he does the ready state?
I haven't seen the ready state stuff, but like Supple Leopard obviously is a staple.
I mean his stuff. They do a lot with sleep and stuff like that as well, and like different down. He talks a lot about down regulation of the nervous system at night and up regulation items in the morning. So he doesn't necessarily talk about sleep patterns, but he talks about optimizing those times of nervous system down regulation to go to bed to relax. So foam rolling, myofascial release, obviously like stretching and things like that are really good down regulators. Mm-hmm. Heat. He said in the morning, light, cold, breathing are nervous system up regulators. Yeah. So he talks about that stuff a lot as far as athletes and becoming ready. What is the ready state? That's kind of where he's going. It's really cool. The stuff that he talks about, he does incorporate a lot of sleep. Like talks about covering all blue and red lights in your room, like your hotel room. If your alarm clock has a light on it, cover it. Right? I sleep with an eye mask, with earplugs if I have to. Like I played around a lot with this, like the sleep stuff a few years ago to really, because I didn't sleep that well a long time ago until I started taking care of that evening and morning rituals to kind of play around with my nervous system and use my body in those times to optimize my sleep, basically.
Could you imagine if you paired like the ready state stuff with optimizing like the sleep doctor stuff that Jesse's talking about? Like you find that perfect rhythm, and then you start doing those things to kind of really like sink your teeth into it.
I mean, that's ideally what you want to do.
Yeah. And imagine if this is like, if only it was this easy to kind of get athletes to do this and buy into this and understand. I think they get it. I think they understand, like, yeah, obviously sleep is important, but you hear it time and time again, especially the collegiate level. Like, well, coach, I had an exam to study for. And it's all about talking to them about optimizing their day and taking advantage of like we all have 24 hours, right? There's only 24 hours in a day. So how you have decided to take advantage of those 24 hours, right, is completely a direct relation to whether or not you're getting the right sleep and whether or not you're doing the right things. And then if being a better athlete is a priority to you, which you hope it is, then you have to understand that, like Jesse said in the beginning, sleeping and eating are the only two ways you can recover. Like, it doesn't matter how many bands you have in your house. It doesn't matter how many foam rollers, what Theragun you have. Like, it doesn't matter. Those things don't matter. While they help with very pinpoint areas of needing like my muscle, like in terms of massaging muscles and stuff like that. It's a very like pinpoint thing, but holistic recovery doesn't happen without just sleeping.
Well, you know, pro
Base of the
athletes are paying
pyramid.
attention to this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, because they have the time and money to do it, and because their livelihood depends on it, you know they're paying attention to all this stuff. So to answer your question, I think Scott or Dennis asked about, does he talk about like the screen time and blue light?
Mhm.
And he does, because when he talks about the melatonin, you want your body's natural melatonin production.
Right.
And blue light from screens sort of tamps that down because you're getting blue light from the screen, which sort of simulates natural light.
Same time.
Sunlight.
Yeah.
It's closer to the colors.
Right. And so you're not getting your natural melatonin production. So there are ways around it if you need to be on a screen late. So Dennis talked about reading. That's a great way to get away from the screen and let your body downregulate and create the melatonin.
I turn mine on night shift mode and I leave it on all the time.
I
honestly don't even change it.
That's so interesting that Apple, there's probably like 4 or 5 years ago, they incorporated that into their software.
Yeah.
And that just, I think that in itself shows how important that if Apple, one of the largest makers of any type of software, and especially phones and screens, is willing to invest thought and a process into, all right, we have people that are up at night scrolling Instagram, doing it. At least we'll give them the night mode where it kind of shifts the color, the colors that are coming out of the screen, at least to help them at least go to sleep. And I think if anything, that has to be something that when athletes are looking at it.
Right. 100%. I totally agree. And then I was going to ask another question too in the middle of that, because the same kind of thing goes for screen time. And does he talk anything about the brainwave progression as you start to fall asleep and as you start to wake up, and how those are different mind stimulus, right? Like if your brain is in beta mode, you're in work mode. Like you're up, you're awake. If you're an alpha or theta, like you're half asleep or half awake. I don't know the exact stuff like that, but does he talk about any of that?
Not in the
as far as
stuff that I've
interrupting
heard.
those brainwaves?
Yeah, not in the stuff that I've heard so far. I don't know. He has a book that I'm sure has a ton more information.
Right.
But just the last point I wanted to make on the screen stuff is there are also amber colored glasses that filter the blue light. So if you're watching TV on a computer, no matter what your screen source is, you're filtered. So he tells a pretty funny anecdote about his wife. She's like, well, just so you know, I fall asleep to having the TV on. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I'm a sleep doctor. I'll break you from that, right? And then he's like, well, so anyone who's married knows that, yeah, that doesn't happen. So he said what he figured out was it was the noise, not the light. And so if you're not looking at it, you're not, if you're not watching it, you're not getting the same stimulus. And he said the noise is great, like, because that is a distraction for you and helps you go to sleep. So it was a pretty funny little anecdote. So he actually has the TV on in his bedroom, even though he wouldn't necessarily recommend that. So yeah,
I think that's another interesting point too, because like I know me personally, I'm the exact same way. Like I put on some TV show, like I put The Office on at night. Like I'll put it on my phone and I'll set my phone off to the side. I'm not watching The Office, but it's a show that is, I've seen it. It's mindless to me, and it's something that like I can listen to as I fall asleep, and I'll chuckle at like some of the funny parts because I can recreate that like scene in my mind. But it has nothing to do with like the light. It's the noise that I like having in the background. And I remember specifically with you, Jesse, when we were at St. Francis together, and we went to I think it was Montana when we played Montana. I remember you saying that you don't sleep with the TV on but you have your at that time at least you had a noise machine that you would put on, and that would help. I mean, I don't think I wonder does he talk about like is it just noise in general, or is it like specific? Because obviously everyone knows that like white noise, like you hear white noise and like ocean noises and serene noises, but like obviously The Office like has parts where he's screaming and doing
right.
Is it just general noise, or is it like are there specific types of noise? Does he talk
at least
about
in
that
the segment I heard, he was just talking about something that can be a distraction for you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's what I feel like too. I feel like it's more of a calming, like it allows your brain to calm and to feel a little more safe so that you can then drop into your sleep a little bit better than if you're just sitting there thinking about everything in your head. That's a big reason why people can't fall asleep.
See, that's really weird. I'm the exact opposite. I need complete silence. I need complete dark. I need.
Yeah, same.
So I have oil diffuser now that kind of helps me calm. I have a weighted blanket to kind of help me calm. But even at that point, if the curtains aren't all the way covered and there's a little bit of light coming through, I won't sleep that night at all. It's so weird.
Yeah.
That is strange. And not strange. It's just strange that like in the sense of how vastly different those are. And I would actually now wonder, if we went back to this quiz, if certain types can deal with certain distractions when going to bed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, can a bear fall asleep to because just
probably anything.
Yeah, like just like Jesse was explaining, like if I'm not a bear, I'm sure I'm something close to it. And because like I get up when the sun goes up, and as soon as it's dark out, like even before I had a kid, as soon as it's dark out, like I'm starting to get like sleepy, and like I like my not my mood shifts, but like I just slow down. Like I feel like
right.
I'm all systems firing. I'm all systems firing when there's light.
Complete opposite. So but, bad.
Yeah. It's
like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm like, did I just start my day? Like 3 p.m. on is like I'm lit. And really? It's 10 p.m. and I'm like, do I need to go to bed right now? I have to get up at 5. Like I have to go to bed right now because I'm getting up at 5. That's like my biggest thing is that
but you
if
probably
I can't get my sleep, right? I physically can't get all of my sleep if I want to be able to stay up into my productive hours because I have really shit to do in the morning. So that's a tough thing for me, but yeah, it's funny. It's interesting to compare it.
Yeah, and I can tell you that if I'm sleepy, whether it's a nap or going to bed at night, doesn't matter if there's light or noise.
Yeah,
I will fall asleep. I can sleep on the plane. I can sleep in a car. When I was in college and worked on a construction site, at lunch break, I would fall asleep on a concrete block with equipment working around me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I worked a job where I was a surveyor. Like I helped surveyors when I was in high school. And middle of the day, we get lunch around like noon. Bright out, we're outside, like at whatever ground we're surveying. And I would grab my lunch bag, I would eat my food, and then roll my lunch bag up and use it as a pillow and be out for 15 minutes. And like that cat nap was just like the best, greatest blessing I've ever had every day because it just like revamped me.
So this is a great.
Oh, go ahead. No,
I was going to say this is a great segue into. I had notes on this. I didn't know if I was going to talk about it. He talks about naps. So he uses a 25-minute window. You've probably heard of a 20-minute window for taking a power nap. He uses 25. He's like, because you don't just fall asleep. You need a little bit of time to go to sleep and wake up. He said, don't nap for more than 25 minutes. That's a good way to get a really quick, like you were saying, Dennis, just middle of the day, help you get through the day. But he said, if you do sleep more than 25 minutes, don't sleep less than 90 because you want to at least get that sleep cycle.
Right.
So Scott, for you, if you're not getting enough sleep at night and you need some of that regenerative sleep during the day to help make up for the lack of sleep at night, then you would do well with finding a time to take a 90-minute nap.
Like a 90-minute nap. I did that for a while, John. When we started.
When we started,
we'd be working early in the morning, and we would either whether we were go back to our place and we do some admin work or crush a nap for 2 hours, like whatever it might be, like that was, what we did in the middle of the day. And we did it, man, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., 6-7 days a week. So
Right.
yeah, definitely interesting. And does he say anything about breaking up your like nightly sleep? Like, so somebody like me, let's say, would it benefit me to work into the midnight 1 o'clock hours when I'm most lit up, and then sleep for 4.5 hours or whatever
I'm most
lit up. Yeah, I know. I meant like lit up, like my nervous system's firing.
Yeah, right.
I'm excited to work. Sorry for my usage of the word lit
Vernacular.
there. But fired up. I'm happy, excited. So would it be beneficial for me to go into the night, 1 a.m., get 2 cycles of sleep, get up, crush the morning, 2 more cycles of sleep? Does he say anything about that? Just curious.
I don't know the answer to that exactly. I get the sense that he wants you to get as much sleep in your overnight in one as possible, but you can use naps to supplement. He did talk about using naps to supplement.
I think didn't the study?
I don't know to what degree you can do that.
Didn't the study talk about that too? I think if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that study you talked about earlier on about the basketball players, the Stanford one, I think that they utilized naps as well, and they accounted for naps as a part of that sleep because like I have our football team, I track when they ate last, especially in the off season, like when they ate last before their lift, and then also how many hours of sleep they got. And it got to the point where guys were like, can I count naps? And I started letting them, because I think I remembered the Stanford study talking about that. And I might be wrong, but they talked about naps. Someone talked about naps and how as long as it's a 90-minute or more nap, then you can account for it because you have gone into that rhythm. So some guys would go from 6 hours of sleep to they're like, well, now if I count that, I got 8 hours. And I'm just like, well, then I think that's justifiable to say like, yeah, you got your 8 hours of sleep. Now, is that 8 hours of sleep, or is that nap needed because you're not spending the right time throughout the day? You know what I mean? Like, did you stay up late last night studying and cramming for a test that you should have been studying for periodically throughout the week? That's a totally different topic, but you still got your 8 hours of sleep in before you train. So in theory, you should be as rested as you need to be for or not as you need to be, but as best rested as you could be compared to a 6 hour sleep cycle. You know what I mean?
I wonder how that would affect kids that are in, let's just say, high school. Because if they stay up late till about midnight, have to wake up at 6, go through a full day of school, and practices at 3 to 5 or whatever.
They're worthless by
I wonder how that would, if they're able to kind of make up for it. So like if you miss the night before, you get 6 hours the night before, and you take a nap after practice, will that kind of carry over to the next day, or is that you can't really make up sleep? I'd be really curious to find that out.
I actually have heard that though too. I have heard that you can't technically make up for sleep. So if you sleep 1 hour one night and you go and you sleep 10 the next, that 1 hour of sleep was still pretty crap. You didn't get 12 hours of great sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
He talks about that a little bit, to where, you've missed that sleep, so you were down for that day. You were in a dip for that day, and you're not going to make up for it. But he also talked about teenagers. He's like, if they're losing sleep during the week, let them sleep in the weekend, because they still need to regenerate. Like, still need to recover.
Right.
They're really making up for the lost sleep, but they still need to recover.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why they sleep for 12 hours.
And when we talk about training in general, right? What's the thing we're looking to do? And that's super compensate, right? And no matter if you were in a training week, right? Most of us look at training weeks, right?
Right.
In a training week, we might be towards the end of the week starting to dip down into that alarm phase, right? Now, but we might not have got great sleep the night before to super compensate, but by the end of the training week, we have been able to super compensate because we've been able to. Now, obviously, you have to be really careful, because you can't then say you had an athlete say you had a kid who had a big test, right? And he went through a whole day of classes, practice at night or practice in the afternoon at 3, and then came to you guys. You guys need to know that information and know that they only got 3 hours of sleep. So that changes. So then that's on the coach to then take those facts and then be able to adjust the workout accordingly to make sure we don't injure them because they got lack of sleep the night before. But over the weekend, they can kind of not make up for it, but for lack of a better phrase, they can make up for it, and they can end up taking the
regenerate.
Right, and they can end up coming back stronger and better for the next training week. And then that's a learning point then to them, is being like, look, we had to back off today. Like, this was our plan for today, but we had to back off today because here's why, and explaining that to them, and then start giving them the evidence as to why sleep is so important, because sleep and recovery affect how well or how hard you can train the day after you sleep or you should have been recovering. It doesn't necessarily affect the overall thing unless you get injured because you weren't able to pull back.
Now, with your training style, do you think it'd be more beneficial to make a heavier, more like central nervous stimulating workout on a Monday or a Tuesday, and then let them coast throughout the whole week? Not really coast, but, like taper it down a little bit, because we know, well, theoretically they should be pretty ready to go on a Monday and a Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday comes along, they're probably mentally drained, didn't get the diet they needed, didn't get the sleep they needed, practices and everything like that, which I think is also good to kind of go off of what we talked about last week, where I like to go off of an RPE scale, because there are those some coaches that have them do 90% of their max on a Friday, the day after a game or something like that, where that's not really feasible, but like in their heads, a 90% that day is still going to benefit them,
Yeah. So I think that's definitely something that I've adopted, the way that I program now, I account for that. So like we can take football, for example, because they're the only team of mine that trains 4 times a week in the off season. So the way their days were set up was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So Monday was a double day where they ran in the morning and then lifted in the afternoon. Tuesday, Wednesday was just lifting in the afternoon. Thursday, they just ran in the morning. And then Friday was just was just lifting in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. So I packed in a ton of our heavier intensities, our higher nervous system demands on that Monday. So we did our speed specific work, and our training was very, very nervous system dominant on a Monday. And then we lifted heavier because they had a big gap. Like we would run at 5 a.m. at 5:30 a.m. and then we'd be done by like 6:45. From 6:45 on, they have classes and they have to eat and stuff like that. But the next group didn't lift until 3. So you have a big break there to recover and at least be able to have a chance to kind of get energy back in your system and be able to kind of be ready to go. But I'll say that I found that we were able to go relatively well or good on a Friday, only because of how our training was set up, that all we did was run on a Thursday morning, and then they essentially had well over 24 hours to recover and come back for that Friday session. But Wednesdays ended up being our high volume days, and it kind of worked out perfectly in that regard too. The high volume days is where I pulled back the intensities. So we just packed in volume and lowered the intensity just to worry about just getting some type of growth, you know what I mean? Just really, really grained movement patterns, that type of stuff. And pack in some of our accessories we packed into those days, because those accessory things aren't necessarily don't have as high of a nervous system demand. So in theory, yeah, I that's how I did program. Was we had our high nervous system demands early in the week, and they tapered through Thursday, through Wednesday. Thursdays were usually like a more of like a quote unquote conditioning day. We conditioned on both running days, but it was more agility, more laterally based conditioning. And then Friday we were able to train a little harder because they've had over 24 hours to kind of boost back up. So we were actually able to push a little bit harder on Fridays. And at the end of the day too, we can't take the mental game out of it too. So like they knew Fridays were our competition day for us in the weight room. Like we utilized competition Fridays a lot, whether it was a cognitive competition or whether it was a gritty, like tug of war, or whatever the case may be. We utilized Fridays to do that. So they were amped up because they know that if they don't finish out the week strong, they weren't allowed to compete for points and give their team points for our overall competition. So that's obviously a factor that I have to account for. But I do think that with a traditional work week or a traditional week having Saturday and Sunday most likely off, you should be in theory able to pack in higher nervous system demands on a opening day of the week or earlier in the week because they should be most well rested.
How do the college kids do with that in your setting? Just like just curious, like if they're off season and they're not competing, are they really taking care of themselves on the weekends?
That's a really good question too. And obviously I don't know the answer, right? Because they're not going to tell me, hey coach, I smashed 20 beers this weekend. Like they're not going to tell me those things, but I'll say this, that they were informed at the beginning of our off season that Mondays are going to be the toughest day because that's our only double day. That was the only day that we were going to double up and do running and lifting those days. Every other day was a single day with one focus. It was either lift.
That's cool.
Lift. So knowing that, I'd like to think that they kind of went into the weekend that, all right, if
Party Friday, not Saturday.
Yes, if I'm going to party, if I'm going to do these things, and you know, like
they're going to do it.
Some people, yeah, exactly. Some people shy away from talking about it. But like, look, I remember when I was in college, I played in college. I remember that you had days where you went out and you had fun and you went and drank beers with the boys, you know, but
you tried to work out the next morning and you suffered through it. Like it's a learning process.
Right. It's a fact of life in terms of in the collegiate setting. But if you can give them as much information as possible, which is what I tried to do at the beginning, and say, look, Mondays are going to be our toughest days. Just know that, and you can make your own educated decision on how you want to approach your weekend. If you want to utilize Sundays as your day to hydrate, eat the best because you didn't do the best on a Friday night into Saturday. You know what I mean?
Right. I was thinking about how we could implement that with like MP and like our place here is like in the private sector, but you know, to let people know that like these are going to be our hard days, but in our current structure, giving them the option, we might see a handful of kids go to the easier days because they have options to switch days.
Yeah.
Whereas your kids would be structured like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We do 2 days a week and they can pick. So if we said, but I guess we could do like first half of the week or your first session of the week is your
like anything
like
before
your
Wednesday.
first session is hitting it. Like we want you to bring your all.
That's actually how I structure it, Scott. Their first session of the week, regardless of what day it is day one for them. And one is always my hardest, most important day. So, unfortunately, then you don't have control over when they're doing day one necessarily. If they're coming in Tuesday, Thursday, well, their hard day is Tuesday. So that's just the way I have it structured.
I don't think. Go ahead, Scott.
Do you have kids in the same class that are running workout 1 and 2 together?
Yes.
And how do you find that with, as far as coaching goes, being able to juggle them well? And like, if you were to have like an assistant or another head coach come in there eventually, what kind of like balancing or juggling or experience in the weight room do you think that they would have to have in order to produce a really good structured speed and strength class with kids doing 2 different weight room workouts?
Right. Honestly, the hardest part for me is the one downfall I find with using Team Builder is, and why I went from using tablets to using TVs, because if I'm using tablets, they're entering their stuff on the tablet, they're clustered around the tablet. I need to leave them room to do that. And for me to see their workout, I'm having to go over to the tablet. So I started putting it up on the TV so I could at least see And then if I needed to explore, I could go over and scroll through and explore. But that's the hardest part for me is just knowing what the heck they're supposed to be doing. Because if I have different people doing different things, I have to look at TeamBuildr to know what they're supposed to be doing. So that's where the challenge comes in with different people doing different things on the same day is just knowing.
Right.
And I've had interns, this is smart but antithetical to what I'm trying to do. They would print out the workouts and come prepared with printouts of the workouts. So they knew, which is great preparation, but not if you're trying to go paperless, having to print out the workouts isn't.
Yeah.
Right. The whole point is to make it easier, right? This is the same stuff that John and I do all the time. We're like, man, this software is going to be great, but it does this, that, and the other thing. And then we're like, the kids aren't doing it. So, or like, it's not working in our setting. Or it's like, well, let's just print them out. And then the kids will fill them out or like whatever. And it's like, well, we just defeated that whole, exactly like you said, we're trying to make it smooth and streamlined and pretty.
Right.
And
so TeamBuildr allows up to 4 people on a screen. I can put 4 people on a TV screen. My brother-in-law used to be a TV repairman. He sold me a 70-inch TV out of his shop that he had repaired. So I've got a 70-inch screen. You can put 4 workouts there, and it's great. But then if I have more than 4, then I put 1 or 2 people on a tablet or let them use their phone.
Okay.
And I can use, if you're logged in as a coach on your phone, you can bring up anybody on your phone. But then it turns into you looking at your phone while people are working out also.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is not what we wanted either. It's something that John and I discussed about going with TeamBuildr. It's like, well, do we give the coaches and the kids and everybody access to their cell phone while they're working out? And to me, that's going to be a gym full of people like this.
Right. I only let the like upperclassmen and college students use their phone. And honestly, they choose to use the technology in the gym versus their phone.
But once they start getting up into that level, like high-end high school and college kids, that's really when you start to see the dedication too. Like the high school kids, the 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, they're not there because they want to. Very few and far between. They're there because their parents brought them there to you. Right. So that's always a tough thing to combat, but it is what it is.
So the 2 points. 1 point, I think it, and they kind of are related. And I think, especially in this industry, we're so tied to tradition, right? While tradition is great, the tradition of strength and conditioning is you have your card, you have your lifting card, and your lifting card has your numbers and it tells you what to do. And any changes you make it because you have Jesse, I have a massive box full of golf pencils and I was the first strength coach to use that there. And everyone's just like, oh, this is a great idea. I was like, I can't even take credit for it. I was like, this is something that we did at St. Francis. Like, and I love because I am such accustomed to the sheet. Like I need the sheet. I need to have that sheet in my hand. My sheet's tucked into my front
right.
pocket.
And there are benefits to using it. I've learned to use TeamBuildr, and there are benefits to using TeamBuildr. And believe me, I'm paying to use it, so therefore I've decided that's the system I want to go with. But there are benefits to having those cards because they're
coaching the fly changes.
Track.
I had to make this. I had to scratch this because it didn't look good. Here's what I replaced it with. Like I can make that quick change.
Can you show me what those look like? What you guys are talking about? I'm having a hard time visualizing exactly what system you're pen and paper. Just cards, just blank.
Yeah, no. It's like it's a printed card, and there's and it's a template on there that like it says A1. This is our lift. B1. This is our lift.
Like what we do for the pitchers program.
Oh, so it's a full paper. I was
okay.
Yeah. Okay, just paper system. I didn't know if these cards were like specially made or like what you guys had going on. But just paper system, right? That's
Yeah, and so to that point, in terms of like being like kind of confined to tradition, back to what Jesse and you were Scott, you were talking about Scott, talking about like when their day one is, right? We are so accustomed to the structures of the work week that Monday is our day, is always got to be day one. Like Monday's the first day of the week, right? The work week. I I truly am, and after doing some reading, so it doesn't really matter when your day one is, right? As long as it's a consistent day one. It doesn't matter if your day one is always Wednesday, and then you have day two on Friday and day three on Sunday, as long as you're taking the proper steps to recover and do all these things. Now, it obviously works to recover the best if you have Saturday and Sunday, because usually in the structure of the world, Saturdays and Sundays are usually a backed off leisurely weekend type of day. But as long as you're following those things, I mean, does it really matter if Wednesdays is always your day one? Like, I don't think it shouldn't, right? It shouldn't in terms of, as long as you're taking care of the recovery aspect of it,
Right.
and you're doing the same things that a Saturday and Sunday would give
Right.
you, you know?
Yeah, I was just more interested in like how to juggle the two different groups of athletes in there as a good coach, like what it takes, to be a good coach and to juggle that.
No, yeah, I definitely,
day
I
one,
definitely get that point.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, because I knew what you were asking, but like what Jesse added to it, I was just like thinking to myself that like day one doesn't really matter when day one is.
Yeah.
Day one is day one. Like I do the same thing in terms of like any of my teams. Their day one is the first day they're in the weight room. Whether it's like say they're scheduled for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but because of games or whatever the case may be, they're not able to come in until Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Fridays are day one that week, and I'll make adjustments based on like when they played last or whatever or like those things came into account. I'll make small adjustments there on my paper sheet, right? Because I can write it in. But the day one is always the first day that they are in the weight room. It doesn't matter if it's Monday. It doesn't matter if it's Friday. It's always day one.
Scott, you had asked about, if you had an assistant, what would that look like as far as them helping with the scenario we were talking about with different people doing different workouts. So I'll answer that with what I tell my interns. I tell them to always come in and look at the workouts of the people that are working out that day, get familiar with them, and then help them set up. So if you know somebody's going to do a trap bar deadlift that day, look and see how much weight they should have on the bar for the first set and get it set up. And that helps to cement in their mind what the heck they should be looking for.
That's the first thing they do, right?
So therefore it should help you to know what you should be looking for. If you see your assistant or your intern or somebody setting up a trap bar deadlift, you probably have a pretty good idea somebody's going to be doing that here.
Hopefully somebody's going to be doing it.
You're not setting that up just for fun. So I just think, preparation, obviously, that's such a dokeyword, but that's what I tell my interns. Just know what the heck they're supposed to be doing. The first thing I tell them to do is learn their name. And that seems like, it seems obvious, but people don't do that.
Yeah.
I think that puts that, it starts putting in their mind, I need to be prepared for who's coming in, what they're doing, sports they play, what injuries they have. And so then that's where the next part comes in. Look at their workout, see what they should be doing, help them set up, spot them, all those things come into play. And it just to, because one of the things that I find falls through the cracks is, you did, because in my system, usually the reps will go down week by week. And therefore, if you're not increasing weight, you're probably not doing it right.
Right.
So, sometimes that honestly falls through the cracks. Oh, last week you did 20s. Why did you do 20s this week? Because somewhere along the line, we weren't prepared to say, hey, try the 22.5s, try the 25s this week or whatever. So that's where, again, in Team Builder, you have to click on the history tab to see what they do. That it adds that extra step of being prepared.
Right. Instead of seeing it on the card where you wrote in.
With the card.
Yeah. But no, I think you could bring up another good point too. Especially, I think it works in all sectors of strength and conditioning, but especially in the private sector. Like in my internship manual, like one of the rules is learn the names, because not only does that help you get prepared and understand that, like, that knowing their name, and especially in your guys' cases, like knowing their name means you know what their workout was because you looked at their sheet and you know who's coming in, right? But in terms of getting more out of your athletes, learning their name, I think, is one of the most simplest ways to do that, because you say, hey, John, hey, next set, great job that last set. Let's go to 95 pounds for your squat. And
You just threw John right under the bus. Wow.
he's been quiet down there, so I wanted to kind of bring him in that way. But like just being able to say something as their name, like they're like, oh, okay. Especially especially if like you do that early, like if you establish that early. I am terrible with names, and it takes me a long time to kind of remember names unless I have like it was easy for me to do certain teams, especially at St. Francis, because we had their attendance sheet and we were checking them in. And when they came in, and I put a face to a name right away. We don't have an attendance sheet type of system yet, and I think that's something I'm gonna start doing. But that's a side note. But learning their names is something that I make sure the interns understand, because it just goes into. I think that is such a. We were talking about earlier about like foundation. That's such a foundational thing in terms of athletic development and being your coach. Yeah, coaching. You're right. That has to be your staple number one thing. If at all else, you learn their names so you can say, good job, John. And next set, here's what you should do. Or good job, Scott. Just go squat 500.
Right. And as an intern, you're more quiet anyway.
Right.
So if you're across the room and Dennis, I see you are supposed to be doing something, but I don't know your name, I'm that much more unlikely to say something to you.
To coach them.
Your name. I can,
because you don't want to like accidentally say the wrong name, and then you also don't want to make it awkward by walking the whole way across the room just to say, hey, you didn't do your tripod deadlift.
Right.
Push your knees out a little more on that squat.
Yeah, right.
One thing I found to kind of get kids' names quicker to click is if I have them on their first day, is I'll ask them what their name is during the warm-up, and then I'll kind of call on them more, or like talk to them kind of more directly in the group, especially if I have like some seasoned kids, where I'll be like, okay, Timmy, why do we do thigh block? Okay, Tim, great. That looks good. Let's do this next time. Okay, Tim, let's do this. But I'll still talk to the other kids, but I'll kind of like, but then at the end of the day, I know who that kid is. Like I know everything about him by the end of the day. And he doesn't know that I'm doing this trick, but I know I will never forget that kid now, because I've kind of
drilling it into your own head.
Like if I have a huge team, the first week is going to be impossible for me to remember names. That's why I kind of choose like 5 at a time and just kind of build off of that. But if I don't know a kid's name, where it's tough. Like when Scott and I were in New York and we had those 500 people a week in Ranger Camp, I knew like maybe 1 or 2 of them, but other than that, and then it kind of was tough because I was focusing more on the 2 kids I knew because I had a relationship with them. And I think if you have a relationship with everybody, then it just kind of builds everything up. Which is great.
And like I joke, but like it's in all seriousness. If I knew your name at Ship within the first like week, it was either because you did something really, really great or really, really bad. Like that's the only way I knew your name in the first week, because otherwise I hadn't had an opportunity to build that rapport and be able to build that relationship. Right. So you either did something that pissed me off enough for me to remember your name, or you did something so great that I remembered your name.
So this is a throwback. Back when I worked at University of Maryland and I was working with the football team, and I was like, I need to learn these guys' name. I would sit down with the paper program that they don't do anymore.
Yeah.
And I would look at faces and read names.
Oh yeah. I know when I was at Temple, that's what one of the assistants did when they first got there. I walked into the office, I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm reading everyone's bio so that like I can put a face to a name, face to a name. And I'm like, that's smart. Especially when you just have one team. Like if you don't know that one team's, like everyone's on that team's name within like 2 weeks, like you're doing something wrong. And it's no excuse, but it's tough for me to learn 450 kids names in a week or two. Like
pretty much anybody, I think. That's a lot of names.
I don't have the mental capacity to do that.
Jesse, do you have the client pictures in their team builder apps? Like when they pull up their profile, the picture's right there with them?
Yeah.
Yeah, we started doing that with ours, and I think it helps. Because even if you have an intern and they don't know, they can at least pull up who it is, and they can be like, okay, I'll look for this person whenever they come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've started going through, and if they didn't add their avatar in their app, then I pulled it off social media and added it on my own.
No, I think to tie this all back in though, to ask a question to tie it all back in, what are your guys's tactics, especially for like given your guys' populations that you guys use or that you guys work with? How do you guys approach talking about sleep, and do you guys have specialized ways other than just saying, hey, make sure you get sleep tonight? You know what I mean? Like, do you guys find that there's any certain way to bring it up to kind of make kids kind of get those connections?
I put a sleep questionnaire in Team Builder. So after their warm up, the first thing they enter in Team Builder is how many hours of sleep did you get last night? Now I don't keep that going because it gets repetitive and it gets, the older kids are like, whatever. But for beginners or the younger kids, I put that in there, and it is more of a conversation. I'm not really collecting data on them necessarily, although the data is in there now and I can track it. But it's a conversation starter.
Yeah.
I see them, especially like the Monday after the Super Bowl or things like that. And, you see them putting.
You can start to, like I talked about this with the same system, is that you can start to then, even if you do have the data, you're not collecting it, but you can still take information from it. So like, hey, that kid really wants to hit this PR and they don't do it and they're upset about it. And you look at their numbers and they're like, hey man, like, you haven't been sleeping. Like what's,
right.
Like then you can bring up that conversation because you have that information. So
I think
also in the private sector, to kind of spin it towards like the business side of it, is if you have a kid who's underperforming that week or for too long, the parent might be upset. But if you have the data, be like, okay, look, sleep wasn't there. Sleep's a big thing. We talk about them about sleep, and then we can kind of show it as proof of how important it is. And then we can be like, okay, cool. This week, I want you to try to aim for 7 hours instead of your usual 4. Then let's see how the performance jumps up. And then that might kind of build a pattern to get them to think about it more.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the points you guys made kind of just like to piggyback off of, I think just asking them the question, right, on a consistent basis, especially in the beginning, like Jesse, you were saying, like it might not need to be something that they do for the entirety that they're there, but especially in the beginning, like the football team, when I started asking her, they were like, are you keeping any of this data? And I would never answer them, but towards the end of the semester, or towards the end of this winter, I finally started to tell them, like, I was like, at the end of the day, guys, like, I just wanted you guys to think about it. Like, I wanted you to have an active thought on how much am I sipping? Because then, like, I asked her, hey, John, did you eat in the last 2 hours? Yeah, I did. All right, how much did you get last night? Well, hold on. I went to bed I guess I didn't go to bed till like midnight, and I had to get up for morning runs today at 5, so like 5 hours. So like, then you're like, oh, well then what made me have to go to bed at 12? And then how can I'm like, it's all related back to how are you spending your time? Because I think as coaches, at the end of the day, are we always working with athletes that are going to make it to the next level? No. But we're always working with athletes that are going to become professionals at something, and making sure they're holding themselves accountable. I think is one of the biggest things as coaches that we can teach them, because that's going to help them when they do finish up with sports and they don't have sports to rely on to create that schedule for them. They have to build their own schedule, and it kind of comes in handy in a time like this, right? When we talk about relating it back to this COVID pandemic, being able to create your own schedule and making sure you're adhering to specific sleeps and going to bed at regular times that you would normally go to bed at when you're in college or you're during going to school every day is important, because at the end of this, you're going to have to go back to school and get back into track quickly. Or at the end of this, we're going to have to go back to work, right? We're going to have to go back to, I'm going to have to go back to getting up at 3:30 in the morning, lifting at 4:30. So now I'm not saying I'm waking up at 3:30 in the morning right now, but I'm making sure I'm up and like I'm up before the sun a little bit and kind of staying myself not too far off of my normal schedule, because it's important to being able to be productive. It just in general, not even just with athletes.
I agree, 100%.
Yep.
Going back to the sleep questionnaire and talking to the adults, the parents, like making them kind of understand, like putting the notes together. I was just wondering if, like, with the group here, what would be like our top 3 to 5 foundational elements that we would consider, those base things that kids should or athletes should pay attention to, and like how we can, implement those more in like the sleep questionnaire, like a food questionnaire, like what kind of things can we start taking to show parents or show athletes? Like, I think the data is important. If you can show a kid, like, you didn't hit that PR this day, that day, and this day, look at your sleep numbers, and we change the sleep and they come back and they do a better job that day, that kid is going to change their sleep habits forever, just because of that one, that line of, I didn't hit it when this happened, I changed one thing and boom, I hit it. That kid is going to change his sleep habits forever, because he's going to understand the importance, or at least he's going to be able to come back to it at some point and say, when I performed my best or when I really hit PRs is when I was getting 9 hours of sleep. So what other kind of foundational elements can we look at in, like, kind of like we did with sleep, and it could be a further topic down the road, but I'm just kind of curious.
Right.
Obviously,
2 things come to
nutrition.
mind. I'm sorry, Dennis.
No, I said obviously just nutrition, right? That's an obvious one that you brought up early. And then go ahead, Jesse.
I was just going to say, one other thing I put in that early stages questionnaire is how sore are you, which we all know how sore you are is not a marker of how effective your workout is. It should track a certain direction over time, right? A beginner is going to be sore. They're going to mark that they're very sore. And then that should slowly go away. And then if it doesn't slowly go away, or it goes away and kind of comes back, then that's a marker of what happened, right? So
it's showing us other things, other leaks in the system. Right.
So soreness, again, it's not a marker of how good your workout is, but it can be a marker of how recovered you were, or, well,
great. Yeah, I like that.
Coach made us do tire flips. Okay, that makes sense. Whatever. And then the other thing is something that gets talked about sometimes is vertical jump.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if your vertical jump is going down, something's happening.
Right, your nervous
going
system.
up, or you're not recovered, or so you can track. And vertical jumps are so easy to test, especially if you have a jump mat. I don't, but they're so easy to test. You can test them. You could test them daily. I don't necessarily think that's the right answer, but I mean, you could test them weekly or monthly, and it kind of gives you an indication of where your athletes are at from a recovery standpoint.
Yeah, because even like ideally, if on good strength program, power program, they should be gaining weight and explosive power, so their vertical jump should increase.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally.
Right.
So if we see any variation in that, or any big dips, can be a good indicator. That's cool. I like that. I've never really played around with it before.
Piggyback off that is I said to piggyback off what Jesse said. Sorry, I'm pointing here because this is where Jesse is on my screen.
That's where he's online too, so you're good.
So to piggyback off that, I started to play with an app that is it's like a $2.99 app, right? And if you guys have tablets, it's super easy for you guys to utilize that. It's called a tap test. It's called a CNS tap test. And it's based off of a similar thought process to like heart rate variability. That your heart rate variability is a telltale sign of where your nervous system is for the day and how ready you are to train that day. So I started utilizing it, and it's very similar to like using a jump mat. Like you could jump every single day, and if you have a range that you're hitting, then that range should tell you whether or not your nervous system is firing correctly, right? Or if you're prepared to train in an explosive manner that day. But I started playing around with that, and it's something that I'm actually going to start taking to some of my teams, especially my in-season teams, that they come in and they do their tap test. And I think I mentioned this last week that like I have like 3 breakdowns of workouts. Like I have a green group, a yellow group, and a red group. Based on what their tap test is, then that tells me what their nervous system is doing for the day. And especially for an in-season sport, I need to make sure that if they're in the red right now with their nervous system and they're crushed, that I don't compile it by crushing them with whatever I had planned for the day. I need to back off somewhere, and most likely I'm going to back off in my volume and probably my intensity. Whereas a yellow, I might just back off in either volume or intensity, and then a green, I can keep them going. So I think that's a cool thing to like talking about like heart rate variability, because I know Sean Jesse, he started playing around with heart rate variability when he was at North Dakota, and that was for his basketball team. He would put out a questionnaire on Google Docs, and they would have to answer that questionnaire. Now, granted, their basketball team was funded enough that they could all have those polar heart rate monitors, and they could test it right away. But the tap test is cheap. It's $2.99 on the App Store. And it's a 10-second test that all they do is they put their hand. Imagine this is on flat on the surface. I just put my hand flat on the surface and I just tap the screen as many times as I possibly can in a 10-second period. And once you do that for like 14 days, you start to get a baseline. You get a baseline reading, and then you can utilize that baseline to then say if you're above that baseline, you're like ready to go. If you're at that baseline, you're probably ready to go. But if you start going too far below that baseline, then you're not necessarily ready to train that day. And then you can kind of attribute an arbitrary number, right, to being able to be like, all right, well then this number is, if you're -5 from your norm, then you're in the yellow. But if you're -10, then you're in the red. It doesn't really matter what the number is, and you can start to kind of narrow that number down as you continue to utilize it. But that definitely ties back into recovery, right? Like if their nervous system's not firing, then they're not recovered properly.
Yeah, that sounds like a great tool, easier than either the jump or the heart rate. A heart rate is just such a hard, heart rate variability is a definite science to it. Man, it's hard to monitor it.
Test, yeah.
Unless you have the money to buy a polar heart rate monitor for all your clients, or if that's like a part of your onboarding price. You know what I mean? Like,
we've thrown around that idea for like some pump classes and stuff.
Really, that's a good idea.
A lot of people do it, like, because you can get them for a pretty good deal if you we looked at a couple of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because especially for those classes, then you can start to establish like specific zones for each of your clients for like. Yeah. To go into like fat burning zones and whatever the case may be. And that's the marketing tool then too for you guys.
Right. For sure. What's what kind of differences do you see between a red and a green on a 10-second tap test? Like how many taps can you physically get in 10 seconds to show enough variability in CNS?
I've had as many as, actually, let me just pull up the data right now, because I have my own, I've been doing it myself just to kind of get an idea. And I have 2 apps. And one of the 2 tracks it for you consistently, where all you gotta do is just hit the one screen. So I've had as high as in 10 seconds, I've had as high as 76 taps, and then I've also had as low as 56. So that's 20. That's
a pretty big jump, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and especially in a 10-second time frame. So my baseline is 65. Like that's the one. That's my mean, and so then I can start to utilize that information to kind of go back and forth. And I tried to find like, this all came from a strength coach or some type of physician, that it started with being able to put taps of a pen on a piece of paper, and then you count the taps. Now that would be
scribbles. Yeah.
That I would be like, my mind would be like, my eyes would be crossed trying to count all the taps or whatever the case may be. But it's the same principle that you can tap more times if your nervous system is ready to fire. But if your nervous system is depleted, then you're not going to get as many taps in. And I tried to find some evidence of like what that variability is going to need to be, right? And I wasn't able to figure it. I wasn't able to find anything that was concrete because I don't think many people did any type of research on, like deep research on it. But it makes sense, and like Jesse said, it's really easy. And we saw that like I had a difference of 20 taps, and that's a big difference when you talk about in a 10-second time frame.
It's actually some studies out, some mini studies about too.
So
what's the name of that app?
So this one, the one that tests it for you immediately, is called Tap Test. It's just or CNS Tap Test.
CNS Tap Test in the App Store.
Yeah, cool. There's two of them. The one that I was just looking at, the logo is it's a side profile of a head, in a white head and like a blue background. Okay. The thumbprint one is the other one that I have. Because I got both of them to kind of test it to see if there was any differences in that.
Now, how does that work? Are there multiple profiles so that it can track one tablet can track multiple athletes?
So then I think the part that you guys would have to take onus in would be to record their scores, or you can ask them to pay for it, right? And they can just get it on their own phone and then keep their own scores in their own phone.
I mean, it can be recorded on TeamBuilder. You can use TeamBuilder as that.
Yeah. So they just
collection and analysis.
Yeah, they just use your tablet to do the tap test, and then I'm sure.
How many taps?
Yeah, and then you just type it in.
They have to enter it.
Yeah, and then
you could enter that into your questionnaire.
Yeah.
Too. I like that. That's pretty cool.